Hello, everyone. Welcome to Blacktop Files. Tonight, we bring you 8 deeply unsettling accounts from state troopers and highway patrol officers who've worked the isolated mountain roads cutting through Appalachia. These are the back roads where cell service dies, where fog rolls in thick enough to hide anything, and where the nearest backup might be an hour away on a good night. The men and women who patrol these stretches see things that never make it into official reports, encounters that defy explanation, situations where protocol means nothing, and moments when the darkness between those yellow lines feels alive. These officers have sworn to protect and serve, but out here, in the hollers and switchbacks of the oldest mountains in America, they've learned that some things can't be protected against, and some roads were never meant to be patrolled after midnight. What you're about to hear are their testimonies, shared under condition of anonymity, stories they've carried in silence for years. Listen carefully, because these accounts might change how you feel the next time you see those red and blue lights in your rearview mirror on a lonely mountain highway.
This happened in the fall of 2014 when I was 29 years old and 2 years into my career as a state trooper in West Virginia. I'm from Charleston originally, but I'd requested assignment to the southern region, covering a stretch of Route 52 that runs through McDowell County. I wanted the quiet, wanted to prove I could handle the isolation and the long nights. I had no idea what I was asking for. The area I patrolled was some of the most economically depressed territory in the state, coal towns that had died decades ago, trailers set back in the woods where you'd see candlelight instead of electric lamps, roads that turned from asphalt to gravel to dirt without warning. On a typical 12-hour night shift, I might see 5 or 6 vehicles total. Most of my time was spent just driving, checking on the few remaining businesses, making sure the curves and hollows stayed quiet. October. That year came in cold and early. By the middle of the month, we were already seeing frost on the windshields and fog thick enough that you had to slow to 20 miles an hour just to see the road. I'd been working the night shift, 11 p.m. to 11 a.m., 4 days a week. The isolation was starting to wear on me. I'd go entire shifts without speaking to another human being except over the radio, and even those exchanges were brief. Dispatch was based 90 miles north, and the closest backup was usually 45 minutes away minimum. On the night it happened, October 18, 2014, I started my shift under a clear sky. Temperature was in the low 40s, no wind, just that deep mountain silence that makes every sound seem louder than it should be. I began my patrol route heading south on 52, checking the usual spots. The old dairy freeze in Iager was dark and empty. The gas station in Bradshaw had its lights on, but nobody inside except the clerk, a woman in her 60s who waved at me through the window without smiling. Around 1:30 a.m., I was about 15 miles south of Bradshaw, in a stretch where the road climbs up along the side of a ridge, forest on both sides, no houses, no turnoffs, except for a few old logging roads that hadn't been used in years. That's when I saw the car. It was a sedan, older model, maybe late 90s, pulled halfway off the road with its hazards blinking. No other lights visible, nobody standing outside. I slowed down and activated my rear-facing spotlight, illuminating the vehicle. Virginia plates. The car looked abandoned, but the engine was running. I could see exhaust coming from the tailpipe. I called it into dispatch, gave them the plate number, location, description. The dispatcher acknowledged and said she'd run the plates. I pulled in behind the sedan, left my light bar on, grabbed my flashlight, and approached from the driver's side. The windows were fogged up. I couldn't see inside. I tapped on the glass with my flashlight, called out that I was state police. No response. I tried the door handle, unlocked. When I opened the door, the interior light came on. The driver's seat was empty, so was the passenger seat, but the engine was running, the keys in the ignition, and the radio was on, tuned to static. On the passenger seat was a cell phone, screen dark. A purse sat on the floor. In the back seat, I saw a suitcase and a child's car seat, empty. The car was warm inside. Coffee in the cup holder was still hot. I checked the registration in the glove box. Vehicle belonged to a Jennifer Marsh, address in Richmond, Virginia. I picked up the cell phone and pressed the power button. It was locked, but the screen showed 11:47 p.m. as the time. My watch said 1:43 a.m. Either the phone's time was wrong, or it had died and been turned off for hours. Dispatch came back over the radio. The plates were registered to Jennifer Marsh. No warrants, no reports, clean record. I told dispatch the situation. Vehicle running, driver absent, personal belongings inside. I requested a welfare check and any information on recent reports in the area. While I waited for dispatch to get back to me, I walked around the vehicle with my flashlight. No damage to the car, no signs of a struggle. The shoulder was gravel and dirt, and I could see footprints leading away from the driver's side door heading into the woods. They looked like women's shoes, something with a small heel. The prints went about 10 feet into the tree line and then just stopped. Not faded, stopped. Like she'd walked 10 feet and vanished. I aimed my flashlight into the woods. The trees were dense, mostly oak and maple with thick underbrush. In the daylight, you could maybe see 20 feet in. At night, with just a flashlight, I could barely see 10. I called out, identified myself, asked if anyone needed help. No answer, just that mountain silence pressing in around me. Dispatch came back. No recent reports of anything unusual in the area. No accidents, no domestic calls, nothing. They asked if I wanted them to contact the sheriff's department for backup. I said yes. Then I made a decision I've questioned 1,000 times since. I followed the footprints into the woods. I kept my flashlight up, one hand on my service weapon. The footprints were clear for those first 10 feet, and then they just weren't there anymore. I searched the ground, widening my circle, looking for any sign she'd continued deeper into the forest. Nothing. It was like she'd taken 10 steps and been erased. I stood there in the trees listening. Somewhere far off I heard an owl, the sound of wind in the branches, and then, underneath that, something else. A voice, faint like it was coming from very far away, but clear enough that I could make out words. "Help me." It was a woman's voice, thin, desperate, coming from deeper in the woods, uphill. I keyed my radio, told dispatch I heard someone calling for help, and was proceeding into the woods to investigate. The dispatcher acknowledged. I started walking uphill, sweeping my flashlight, side to side, following the voice. "Help me, please!" It stayed at the same volume no matter how far I walked. Always faint, always distant, like I wasn't getting any closer. I kept going. The trees got thicker. I had to push through branches, step over fallen logs. My boots sank into wet leaves. I walked for what felt like 10 minutes, always uphill, always toward that voice. And then I came out into a clearing. It was maybe 30 feet across, perfectly circular, ringed by trees. The ground was bare dirt, packed hard, with no grass or undergrowth. In the center of the clearing stood a shape about 5 feet tall, rough and irregular. As I got closer, I saw it was a cairn, a pile of stacked stones, deliberately arranged. Some of the rocks were the size of my head, others smaller, all fitted together in a column that rose to a point. The voice had stopped. I stood at the edge of the clearing, my flashlight beam on that pile of stones. Something about it made my skin crawl. It looked old, older than anything had a right to look. The stones were covered in pale lichen, and dark stains streaked down from the top. Stains that might have been rust or water damage or something else. I walked around the clearing looking for footprints. Any sign that Jennifer Marsh had been here. Nothing. The dirt was unmarked except for my own boots. I approached the cairn slowly, my light playing over the stones. That's when I saw the objects tucked into the gaps between the rocks. Small things. A child's doll, so old the plastic had turned yellow. A tarnished pocket watch. A pair of glasses with cracked lenses. A wedding ring. A driver's license in a cracked plastic holder, the photo too faded to make out. And more. Dozens of small personal items, all of them old. All of them left there deliberately. I reached out toward one of the objects, the pocket watch, and the moment my fingers touched the metal, I heard the voice again. "Help me!" right behind me, close enough that I should have felt breath on my neck. I spun around, flashlight up, hand on my weapon. Nothing. The clearing was empty, but now I could hear other voices, all of them faint, all of them coming from different directions. Help me, please. It hurts. I can't find the road. Where's my daughter? They overlapped. A dozen voices or more, men and women and children, all of them calling out from the darkness beyond the tree line. I backed toward the center of the clearing, trying to watch every direction at once. My radio crackled. Dispatch, asking for my location. I grabbed the radio, tried to respond, but all that came through was static. I moved around the clearing, trying to find a spot where my radio would work. Nothing but static. The voices were getting louder. I made a decision. I started walking back the way I'd come, moving fast, not quite running. I kept my flashlight ahead of me and my hand on my weapon. The voices followed me through the trees, always just behind me, always just out of sight. Don't leave us. Please help. Come back. I didn't look back. I focused on getting downhill, on finding the road. The trees seemed thicker than they had on the way up, the undergrowth more tangled. I had to force my way through. Branches caught at my uniform. Roots tried to trip me. And then I heard something that wasn't a voice. Heavy footsteps moving through the brush parallel to me. Something big, moving on two legs, keeping pace with me but staying just outside my flashlight beam. I stopped. The footsteps stopped. I started walking again. The footsteps resumed. I ran. I crashed through the undergrowth, flashlight swinging wildly, not caring about noise or caution. The footsteps behind me broke into a run too, heavy and fast, getting closer. I could hear breathing, deep and ragged, and a smell hit me, something rotten, like meat gone bad in the summer heat. I saw lights ahead, red and blue, flashing through the trees. The road. I burst out of the forest, stumbled onto the shoulder, and nearly ran straight into a sheriff's deputy who was standing by my patrol car. He grabbed my arms, steadied me, asked if I was okay. I was gasping, trying to catch my breath. I looked back at the tree line. Nothing. No footsteps, no voices, no smell, just dark woods and silence. The deputy's name was Carson. He'd been sent as backup. He'd arrived about 5 minutes earlier, found my car still running and the sedan with the door open. He'd been about to call it in as an officer in distress when I came running out of the woods. I told him what I'd heard, what I'd found. He listened, his expression neutral. When I finished, he asked if I'd found the driver of the sedan. I said no. He nodded slowly. He told me that area had a reputation. Locals called it the Holloway Stretch. Over the past 40 years, at least a dozen people had abandoned vehicles along that section of Route 52 and walked into the woods. Some were found eventually, miles away, with no memory of how they'd gotten there. Others were never found at all. Search and rescue teams had combed those woods after every incident. They'd never found the cairn I described, never found anything except trees and more trees. We went back to the sedan. Carson called in a tow, and we processed the scene. Everything went into evidence. The purse, the phone, the suitcase, the car seat. Dispatch managed to contact Jennifer Marsh's family in Richmond. They said she'd been driving to visit her sister in Kentucky, had left Richmond around 6 p.m. She had a 4-year-old daughter with her. The car seat was empty. There was no child in the vehicle. The next day, search and rescue went into the woods. I went with them, tried to lead them back to the clearing. I couldn't find it. We searched for 6 hours, covered a square mile of forest. No clearing, no cairn, no footprints, nothing. Jennifer Marsh and her daughter were never found. The case is still open, listed as missing persons. The sedan went to the impound lot and eventually to auction when nobody claimed it. I kept working that stretch of highway for another 3 months. Every time I drove past that spot, I'd slow down and look into the woods. I never saw anything unusual, but twice, late at night when I was the only car on the road, I heard my radio crackle with static, and under the static, faint voices calling for help. In January 2015, I requested a transfer. They moved me to a different county, a busier district. I don't work nights anymore. I've never told anyone the full story of what happened that night, except for Carson, and he just nodded when I finished like he'd heard similar stories before. I still think about Jennifer Marsh and her daughter. I wonder if they walked into those woods and found that clearing. I wonder what they saw. And I wonder how many of those voices I heard were people who'd made the same walk. People who'd followed the same faint calls for help and never made it back to the road. Sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I think about that cairn and all those objects tucked between the stones. Personal things. Things people wouldn't leave behind unless something made them. And I think about the fact that my flashlight beam touched that pile of offerings. That I almost added my own touch to whatever that place was collecting. I don't drive through McDowell County anymore. I take the long way around, even if it adds an hour to the trip. And I tell everyone I know, if you ever break down on Route 52 south of Bradshaw, stay in your car, lock the doors, and wait for help. Don't listen if you hear voices. Don't go into the woods. Whatever's calling you, it's not what you think it is.
Our next story comes from a Kentucky state trooper who learned that some calls for assistance should never be answered, especially when they come from places that don't appear on any map.
My name is Alex, and I've been a Kentucky state trooper for 12 years. I'm originally from Lexington, but in 2016 I was assigned to a district covering portions of the Daniel Boone National Forest and the mountain highways that wind through Laurel and Clay counties. It's beautiful country. Steep ridges, narrow valleys, roads that snake through gaps in the mountains with names like Wildcat and Stinking Creek. But it's also empty country, the kind where you can drive for 30 miles and see maybe 2 houses and no other vehicles. The incident I'm about to describe happened in March 2016 during the last cold snap of winter. I was working a day shift, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., covering a loop that included portions of US 25, Route 80, and various county roads. The weather was overcast, temperature in the mid-30s, with patches of old snow still visible in the shadowed areas under the trees. Around 2 p.m., I was heading east on Route 80, coming up on the tiny community of 4 Mile. That's not really a town, just a name on a map where a couple of roads intersect, and there used to be a post office. I was about 3 miles from the intersection when my radio crackled with a transmission. It wasn't from dispatch. It was a voice I didn't recognize. Male, urgent, but controlled. Any unit in the vicinity of Route 80 and Goose Creek, we have a 1050 with injuries, requesting immediate assistance. A 1050 is a traffic accident. I grabbed my radio, acknowledged, said I was 3 miles out. I asked for their unit number. Static, and then the voice again. Unit is, we're Kentucky Highway Patrol. Single vehicle, went off the road, driver is trapped. We need medical assistance. Something was off. Kentucky Highway Patrol had been absorbed into the state police back in the 70s. Nobody should have been identifying themselves as Highway Patrol. But the urgency in the voice was real. And if there was an accident with injuries, I needed to respond. I asked them to confirm their location. They said Route 80, approximately half a mile past the Goose Creek Bridge, south side of the road. I said I'd be there in 5 minutes and requested that dispatch send medical. Dispatch came on, asked me to repeat my traffic. I relayed what I'd heard. There was a pause, and then the dispatcher said she hadn't received any accident reports in that area, and she hadn't sent the transmission I'd just heard. She asked if I wanted her to verify with other units. I told her yes, but I was going to check the location anyway. She acknowledged and said she'd have an ambulance roll from London, but it would be at least 25 minutes. I accelerated, hit my lights, and covered the distance quickly. I knew the area. Goose Creek ran through a narrow valley, and the road crossed it on an old concrete bridge that had been there since the 30s. The land on both sides was national forest. No houses, no businesses, just trees and the occasional pull-off where hunters parked. Crossed the bridge and started watching for an accident. The road curved uphill, following the contour of the ridge. Half a mile past the bridge, I saw skid marks. Fresh ones, black rubber streaking across the asphalt, heading toward the south side of the road. I slowed down, pulled onto the shoulder, and activated my rear flashers. The skid marks went off the road and into the trees. I could see broken branches, torn underbrush. I grabbed my radio, reported my location, said I had evidence of a vehicle leaving the roadway. Then I got out and approached on foot. The vehicle was about 20 feet down a steep embankment, nose first into a tree. It was an old cruiser, white with a gold stripe, light bar on top. The paint was faded, the body style from the 70s or early 80s. Definitely not a current Kentucky State Police vehicle. I made my way down the embankment carefully, using trees to steady myself. The ground was slippery with wet leaves and patches of ice. As I got closer, I could see the cruiser was in bad shape. The front end was crumpled, the windshield spiderwebbed with cracks. The light bar was broken, one side hanging loose. I reached the driver's side door and looked in. The driver was slumped over the steering wheel, face turned away from me. He was wearing a uniform I didn't recognize, dark blue with patches on the shoulders. His hat had fallen onto the passenger seat. There was blood on the steering wheel, blood on the side of his head. I tried the door, locked. I tapped on the window, called out. No response. I moved around to the passenger side. That door was unlocked. I opened it and reached in to check for a pulse. The moment my fingers touched his neck, he moved. His head turned toward me, and I found myself looking at a face that was wrong. The skin was gray, almost translucent. The eyes were open but milky, like cataracts had covered them completely. His mouth opened, and I could see his teeth were black, rotted. He spoke. The voice was the same one I'd heard on the radio. Help me. I jerked back, lost my footing, and slid down the embankment another 10 feet before I caught myself on a sapling. My heart was hammering. I looked back up at the cruiser. The passenger door was still open, but I couldn't see inside from my angle. I keyed my radio, tried to call for backup. Static. I checked my phone. No signal. I was on my own. I climbed back up to the cruiser, approached more slowly this time. The passenger door was swinging loose in the breeze. I looked inside. The driver was still slumped over the wheel, but now I could see the back of his head. There was a hole there, a gunshot wound. Old, the edges of it dried and black, and I could see through the door on the driver's side. The window was shattered, and there was spatter on the glass, old blood, browned with age. This wasn't a fresh accident. This had happened a long time ago. I backed away from the vehicle, pulled out my flashlight, even though it was daylight, and started examining the scene more carefully. The tree the cruiser had hit was dead, had been dead for years. The impact site was old, covered in moss. The broken branches weren't fresh breaks. They were gray and weathered. I circled around to the front of the cruiser. The license plate was barely readable, covered in rust and dirt. I copied down the number. The light bar had lettering on it, faded but still visible. Kentucky Highway Patrol. My radio crackled. Unit is... We're Kentucky Highway Patrol. Single vehicle went off the road, driver is trapped. We need medical assistance. The same message, word for word. But this time, I could hear other things in the background of the transmission. Wind, trees creaking, and voices, multiple voices, all talking at once, too low to make out individual words. I keyed my radio, asked who I was speaking to, static, and then the transmission repeated again, exactly the same. I started backing toward the road, keeping my eyes on the cruiser. The passenger door was swinging more widely now, like something was pushing it from inside. I could see movement in the front seat, shadows shifting. I reached the embankment and climbed up fast, not caring about the noise I made or the dirt I was getting on my uniform. I got to the top, crossed the road, and went to my patrol car. My radio was going crazy, transmissions cutting in and out, all of them the same message, over and over. I grabbed my laptop, ran the license plate from the cruiser. It took a minute. Old plates, old database, but the result came back. The vehicle was registered to the Kentucky Highway Patrol, decommissioned in 1979. It had been the assigned vehicle of Sergeant William Haynes, who died in the line of duty on March 15, 1979. According to the record, Haynes had been responding to a reported accident on Route 80 near Goose Creek when his vehicle left the road. He'd been killed instantly. The cruiser had been totaled, removed from the scene, and eventually scrapped. I looked at the date, March 15th. Today was March 15th, 2016. Exactly 37 years later. My radio went silent, completely silent, not even static. I stood by my car, looking at the spot where the cruiser had gone off the road. I could still see the skid marks, but as I watched, they seemed to fade, the black rubber turning gray and then disappearing entirely. Within a minute, the road looked like it always did. Old asphalt, weathered and cracked, with no sign that anything had ever disturbed it. I walked back to the edge of the embankment and looked down. The cruiser was still there, but it looked different, more decayed. The tires were flat and rotted. Rust had eaten through the body panels. The windshield was completely gone, just a frame with a few shards of glass clinging to it. It looked like it had been there for decades, slowly being reclaimed by the forest. I climbed down one more time, approached the driver's side. The door was open now, hanging loose. The seat was empty, except for the old uniform and hat, both of them rotted and stained. No body, no blood, just old fabric and leather falling apart. On the dashboard, I found a clipboard. The paper was yellowed and brittle, but I could still read it. It was an accident report form, filled out in careful handwriting. The date at the top was March 15, 1979. The location was Route 80, approximately half a mile past the Goose Creek Bridge. The reporting officer was Sergeant William Haynes. He'd been responding to an accident. Single vehicle off the south side of the road, driver trapped and calling for help. Haynes had documented his arrival at the scene, his attempts to reach the vehicle, and then the handwriting changed, became shaky, harder to read. The last line said, "Vehicle not found. Heard voice calling for assistance, but cannot locate source. Requesting backup." Below that, in different ink, someone had written, "Sergeant Haynes killed in single vehicle accident on Route 80, March 15, 1979, while responding to reported incident. No other vehicles found at scene." I took the clipboard with me, climbed back to the road, and sat in my patrol car for a long time. Eventually, my radio crackled back to life. Normal traffic, dispatch checking in, asking for my status. I told them I'd checked the location, found nothing, and was resuming patrol. I didn't tell them about the cruiser. I didn't tell them about Sergeant Haynes. I filed the clipboard in my personal locker when I got back to the station, and I've kept it there ever since. I did some research after that day. William Haynes had been 42 when he died, a 15-year veteran of the Highway Patrol. He left behind a wife and 2 kids. The accident report said he'd lost control on a curve, overcorrected, and went off the road. But there was a note in the file, a statement from the trooper who'd found him. The trooper had said Haynes's radio had been keyed open when he arrived, and he'd heard something on the transmission before it cut out. A voice asking for help. Every year since 2016, on March 15th, I've made a point of being somewhere else. I don't work that district anymore, requested a transfer in 2017. But I still hear things from the troopers who do work it. Every few years, someone reports finding an old cruiser off Route 80 near Goose Creek. They investigate, find nothing but forest. And every time it happens, it's March 15th. I think about Sergeant Haynes sometimes. I wonder if he found what he was looking for that day in 1979. I wonder if he's still looking. And I wonder if one of these years, someone's going to respond to that call for help and not come back. Because whatever's out there on that stretch of road, it's patient. It's been waiting for almost 40 years now, and it knows eventually someone will follow that voice all the way in, past the point where you can turn back. I never drive on Route 80 if I can help it, and if you're ever out that way in March and you hear someone calling for help on the radio, Someone who identifies themselves as Kentucky Highway Patrol. Don't respond. Just keep driving. Whatever they need help with, it's been finished for a long time.
The next account comes from a Virginia state trooper who discovered that certain mountain roads run longer at night than they do during the day, and that sometimes the vehicles you pass are making journeys that started decades ago.
I'm Sarah, and I worked for the Virginia State Police from 2008 to 2018. I grew up in Harrisonburg in the Shenandoah Valley, so the mountains were familiar territory. When I graduated from the academy, I was assigned to a district that covered portions of Highland and Bath counties, some of the most remote and least populated areas in Virginia. We're talking about mountain roads that barely see maintenance, tiny communities connected by routes that climb up and over ridges at grades steep enough to make your ears pop. What happened to me occurred in November 2012 on a Friday night during a cold snap. I was working the overnight shift, 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. My assignment was to patrol U.S. Route 220, which runs north-south through both counties, and to check on various secondary roads that branched off from it. The temperature had dropped into the 20s, and there'd been warnings about black ice on the mountain roads. I started my shift out of the Monterey station, heading south on 220. The first few hours were quiet, a handful of vehicles, all of them local, all of them being careful on the icy patches. Around midnight, I turned off 220 onto Route 84, a narrow 2-lane road that climbs up into the mountains toward the West Virginia border. Route 84 is one of those roads that feels wrong even in daylight. It runs for about 18 miles through national forest, no houses, no businesses, just switchbacks and steep grades. At night, especially in winter, it feels like you're driving through a tunnel. The trees press in close on both sides, and your headlights seem to be swallowed up by the darkness ahead. I was about 6 miles in when I saw the headlights behind me. They appeared suddenly, high beams coming up fast. I checked my speed. I was doing 35 in a 45 zone, being cautious because of the ice. The vehicle behind me was closing the distance quickly, riding maybe 20 feet off my bumper. I slowed down, moved to the right to let them pass. The vehicle stayed behind me. I could see it in my rearview mirror, a large vehicle, maybe a truck or SUV, with old-style round headlights. It was close enough that the glare was making it hard for me to see the road ahead. I tapped my brakes, a warning. The vehicle behind me didn't slow down. I activated my rear-facing lights, the red and blues. The vehicle stayed on my bumper. I reached for my radio to call in a reckless driver and request backup. But before I could key the mic, the vehicle behind me accelerated and pulled into the left lane to pass. It was a truck, a big one, an 18-wheeler with a tall cab and a long trailer. Old from the 70s or early 80s, based on the shape. It was painted dark, maybe black or dark blue, and had no company markings visible. As it pulled alongside me, I got a look at the cab. The driver was visible in silhouette, hunched over the wheel. He didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge my lights. He just kept accelerating, pulling ahead. I watched as the truck passed and then moved back into the right lane ahead of me. That's when I noticed the trailer. It was a refrigerated unit, the kind used for hauling frozen goods. The back doors were old style with those heavy latches and a sliding bar lock. And there was something wrong with them. They were shaking, rattling, like something inside was hitting them from the interior. As I watched, the doors bulged outward. Not much, just an inch or two, like something heavy had been thrown against them from the inside. Then they settled back. Then they bulged again, a steady rhythm. Bang, bang, bang. I slowed down, putting distance between my cruiser and the truck. I grabbed my radio, called in the plate number, or tried to. The truck didn't have a plate. No plate on the back of the trailer, no identification numbers, nothing. I reported a commercial vehicle with no tags, possible equipment violation, traveling north on Route 84. Dispatch acknowledged and asked if I was initiating a stop. I said yes. I activated my siren and lights, accelerated to catch up with the truck, and motioned for it to pull over. The truck didn't slow down. It kept moving at the same steady speed, maybe 50 miles an hour, the doors on the trailer continuing their rhythmic banging. I radioed again, said the vehicle was failing to yield. Dispatch asked for my location. I told them I was approximately 8 miles north of Route 39 on Route 84. There was a pause, and then the dispatcher said she couldn't find me on the GPS tracker. She asked me to confirm my location. I looked at my dashboard GPS. The screen was flickering, showing static. I glanced at my odometer. I'd driven 8 miles on this road, but the signs I'd passed, I tried to remember them. The last mile marker I'd seen clearly was mile 3. That had been at least 10 minutes ago. The road ahead looked the same as it had for the past 6 miles. Trees, curves, darkness. The truck ahead of me was maintaining its speed, and the trailer doors were still banging. I could see now that there were streaks on the doors, dark stains running down from the top like something had leaked out and dried. I made a decision. I accelerated, pulled into the left lane, and came up alongside the cab. I hit my spotlight, aimed it at the driver's side window. The driver turned and looked at me. He had no face, just a smooth expanse of skin where his features should have been, like someone had erased them. But he was wearing a trucker's cap and a flannel shirt, and his hands on the wheel were normal, human hands. I swerved back into the right lane, nearly losing control on a patch of ice. My heart was pounding. I fell back, putting several car lengths between me and the truck. The truck's brake lights came on. The vehicle slowed, pulling to the side of the road. I slowed too, staying back, trying to decide what to do. My radio was hissing static. My GPS was still flickering. I checked my phone. No signal. The truck came to a complete stop on the shoulder. Its engine was still running. I could see the exhaust. The trailer doors stopped banging. Everything was silent except for the idle of the diesel engine and my own breathing. I sat there for what felt like a long time, but was probably only a minute or two. Protocol said I should approach the vehicle, make contact with the driver. Training said I should wait for backup. Instinct said I should drive past and get the hell out of there. Before I could decide, the driver's side door of the truck opened. The driver stepped down onto the road. He was tall, maybe 6'3", broad-shouldered, wearing jeans and work boots and that flannel shirt. The cap was pulled low over where his face should have been. He started walking toward my cruiser. I put my hand on my weapon, rolled down my window an inch. "Stop right there. State Police. I need to see your license and registration." He kept walking. He moved strangely, his gait stiff and mechanical, like his joints didn't bend properly. As he got closer, I could see that his hands were wrong. The skin was gray, mottled, and the fingernails were black. I said, "Stop." He reached my driver's side door and bent down, as if to look in at me. There was no face under that cap, just smooth skin, flesh tone but lifeless, like wax. I drew my weapon, pointed it at him through the window. Step back now." He tilted his head, like he was curious. Then he reached out toward the window with one gray hand. I hit the gas. My cruiser surged forward, tires spinning on the icy road before they caught. I fishtailed, corrected, and accelerated hard. In my rearview mirror, I could see the figure standing in the middle of the road, motionless, watching me go. The truck was still there, pulled over on the shoulder, exhaust rising in the cold air. I drove fast, faster than I should have on that road, taking the curves hard, my lights flashing. I keyed my radio over and over, calling for backup, for dispatch, for anyone, nothing but static. I drove for what felt like 20 minutes, though my sense of time was completely gone. The road just kept going, the same curves, the same trees, like I was in a loop. My odometer was spinning, but the mile markers weren't changing. And then, ahead of me, I saw the truck again. It was parked on the shoulder in exactly the same position. The driver's side door was open. The figure was standing in the road in the same spot, as if I'd never passed it. I slammed on the brakes, came to a stop about 50 yards back. I sat there, trying to understand what I was seeing. It wasn't possible. I'd been driving north. The truck had been behind me. Now it was ahead of me again. My radio crackled, not with static this time, but with a voice. A woman's voice, high and thin, distorted. "Let us out. Please, it's so cold. Let us out." I grabbed the radio. "Who is this? Identify yourself." "Please, we can't breathe. Let us out." Other voices joined in, overlapping, all of them begging, crying, screaming, "Let us out. It's been so long. Help us. Please, God, help us." The voices were coming from the trailer. I looked at the truck ahead of me, and I could see the doors shaking again, bulging outward, the metal screeching as something inside threw itself against them. And then I saw others, people, standing by the side of the road. They'd appeared out of nowhere, a dozen of them, maybe more. Men, women, children, all of them wearing old clothes, 70s era jackets and jeans and dresses, all of them gray-skinned, all of them faceless. They started walking toward my cruiser from both sides of the road. I threw the car into reverse, hit the gas, and started backing up at speed. I didn't care about the curves, didn't care about the ice. I just needed to get away from that truck and those figures. I reversed around a curve, barely staying on the road. When I looked forward again, the truck was gone. The figures were gone. The road was empty. And then I saw a sign, Route 39, 2 miles. My GPS flickered back to life. My radio crackled with normal dispatch traffic. I stopped the car, sat there shaking, trying to process what had just happened. I looked at my watch. It was 12:47 a.m. I'd entered Route 84 at midnight. I'd been on that road for less than an hour, but it had felt like I'd driven for days. I turned around, headed back south toward Route 39, and got the hell off Route 84. When I reached the intersection, I pulled over and sat there for a long time. Eventually, I called into dispatch, said I wasn't feeling well, and requested permission to return to the station. They granted it. I spent the next week researching. I found out that in July 1978, a refrigerated truck carrying goods from a meat packing plant in Elkins, West Virginia, to a distributor in Virginia had disappeared on Route 84. The truck, the driver, and the cargo were never found. 6 months later, a search team combing the area for a missing hiker had found human remains in the woods about a mile off the road. 5 bodies, all of them showing signs of hypothermia and starvation. They'd been identified as hitchhikers and transients who disappeared from various locations in West Virginia and Virginia in the summer of 1978. The theory was that they'd been picked up by someone, locked in a trailer, and left to die. But they never found the vehicle or the person responsible. Route 84 runs for 18 miles from Route 39 to the West Virginia state line. I've driven it in daylight since that night, timed it carefully. 18 miles, start to finish, 25 minutes at a moderate pace. But that night, I was on that road for 47 minutes according to my watch, and I covered at least 30 miles according to my odometer before the GPS came back online. I transferred out of that district in 2013. I still work for the state police, but I'm down in the Tidewater region now, where the roads are flat and straight and well lit. I don't do mountains anymore. If you ever drive Route 84 at night, and you see an old truck with no plates and trailer doors that shake like something's trying to get out, don't follow it. Don't try to stop it. Just turn around, get off that road, and don't look back. Because that truck is making a delivery that never finished, and the people inside have been waiting in the cold and the dark for more than 40 years. And if you stay on that road long enough, you might end up making the rest of the journey with them.
This next testimony comes from a Tennessee Highway Patrol officer who responded to what should have been a routine abandoned vehicle call, only to discover that some cars are left behind for reasons that have nothing to do with mechanical failure.
My name's Chris, and I've been with the Tennessee Highway Patrol for 9 years. I'm from Knoxville, but in 2017, I was assigned to a district that covered parts of Cocke County and the foothills of the Great Smoky Mountains. It's rugged country, kind where the haulers have their own rules, and the people can be hard if you don't approach them right. Highways are a mix of newer routes built in the 80s and old roads that have been there since before the interstate system, winding through gaps in the mountains and along ridgelines. This happened in August 2017, during a heat wave that had pushed temperatures into the upper 90s for 2 weeks straight. I was working an evening shift, 3 p.m. to midnight, and around 7 p.m. I got a call from dispatch about an abandoned vehicle on Highway 32 near the community of Cosby. Highway 32 runs along the northern edge of the Smokies, connecting a series of small communities and providing access to various park entrances. The stretch near Cosby is heavily forested, with pull-offs for hikers and fishermen accessing the mountain streams. During the summer, it sees decent traffic from tourists. Once you get a few miles past the main park entrance, it gets quiet fast. The call was straightforward. Motorist had reported a car parked in a pull-off, hood up, nobody around. Possible breakdown. Dispatch gave me the location, about 3 miles east of Cosby, north side of the road, near a trailhead. I acknowledged and headed that way. It was a beautiful evening, one of those late summer nights where the light comes golden through the trees. The mountains look purple in the distance. I had my windows down, radio low, just enjoying the drive. I reached the pull-off around 7:20. The car was right where dispatch had said, a sedan, maybe 10 years old. Light blue, parked at the far end of the gravel area. Hood was up, no other vehicles around, no hikers visible on the trail. I pulled in behind it, ran the plates, came back registered to a Melissa Pruitt, address in Newport, about 30 miles west. No warrants, no red flags. I radioed in that I was on scene and got out to investigate. The heat hit me immediately. Even with the sun getting lower, the temperature was still in the low 90s, and the humidity made it feel like you were breathing through a wet towel. The pull-off was surrounded by dense forest, and the air was thick with the smell of hot asphalt and pine sap. I approached the vehicle. The driver's side door was closed but unlocked. I looked through the window, keys in the ignition, purse on the passenger seat, cell phone in the cup holder. In the back seat, I saw a cooler, a beach towel, and a child's backpack decorated with cartoon characters. I opened the door and checked the interior. Engine was off. I tried the key. The engine turned over but wouldn't start. Sounded like fuel pump maybe, or electrical. The gas gauge showed half a tank. I walked around to the front. The hood was propped open on its support rod. I looked at the engine. Nothing obviously wrong, no leaking fluids, no disconnected wires. But what caught my attention was the position of the car. It was parked at the very edge of the gravel, right up against the tree line, and it was backed in. Whoever parked it had taken the time to reverse into the space, which struck me as odd if they'd just had a breakdown. I called out, identified myself, asked if anyone needed assistance. My voice echoed off the trees and died away. No response, I walked to the trailhead, looked down the path. It led up into the woods, following a stream. The trail was marked with faded blazes on the trees. I called out again, nothing. I went back to my cruiser and radioed dispatch. I gave them an update. Vehicle appeared to be disabled, owner not present. Personal items inside, including what looked like a child's belongings. I requested a welfare check on the registered owner and asked if there were any recent missing persons reports in the area. Dispatch came back a few minutes later. No recent missing persons, but they tried to reach Melissa Pruitt by phone. In the meantime, they asked if I wanted them to send a tow. I said yes, and also requested a park ranger to check the trail. While I waited, I searched around the pull-off. I found footprints in the dust on the shoulder. Women's shoes, probably size 7 or 8, leading from the driver's side door to the tree line. But they didn't continue into the woods. They stopped at the edge, right where the gravel met the dirt and undergrowth. I looked closer. The footprints were deep, like she'd been standing there for a while, shifting her weight. And there was a pattern in the dirt, a scuff mark that looked like she'd turned around several times, maybe pacing. I was about to follow the tree line when I noticed something else. On the car's rear bumper, written in the dust, was a message, "Don't follow." 2 words, written in what looked like a finger. The letters were shaky, written by someone in a hurry or under stress. I took photos of the message and the footprints, then checked the car again more carefully. I found a purse in the passenger seat and looked inside. Wallet, cash, credit cards, driver's license. The photo on the license showed a woman in her early 30s, brown hair, tired smile, Melissa Ann Pruitt, age 34. In the back seat, I opened the child's backpack. Coloring books, crayons, a change of clothes for a kid, maybe 5 or 6 years old. At the bottom of the bag, I found a photo, the kind you'd print from a home printer. It showed a woman, Melissa, I assumed, with a little girl, both of them smiling, standing in front of a waterfall. The photo was dated June 2017, 2 months earlier. My radio crackled. Dispatch had reached Melissa Pruitt's emergency contact, a sister in Newport. The sister said Melissa and her daughter Emily had left that morning for a day trip to the Smokies. They were supposed to be back by dinner. She'd tried calling Melissa's phone around 6 p.m. and hadn't gotten an answer. I felt the first prickle of real worry. A disabled car was one thing. A woman and a child missing in the mountains in 90-degree heat was something else entirely. I asked dispatch to escalate this to a missing persons case and get search and rescue rolling. Then I grabbed my flashlight, even though it was still light out, and walked to the trailhead. The trail was well maintained at first, wide enough for 2 people following the stream uphill. I moved quickly, calling out every few minutes, listening for any response. The sound of the water covered most other noises, and the forest was thick enough that visibility was limited to maybe 20 yards in any direction. I'd gone about half a mile when I found the first marker. It was a ribbon, bright pink, tied to a tree branch at eye level. The kind of thing hikers use to mark a path, except the trail was already marked, and this ribbon was off to the side, on a tree about 10 feet into the woods, away from the main path. I walked over to it. Behind that tree, I could see another ribbon, this one deeper in the woods, and beyond that, another. Someone had marked a path leading away from the main trail, heading uphill into denser forest. I keyed my radio, reported what I'd found. Dispatch acknowledged. I followed the ribbons. They led up a steep slope, through underbrush that hadn't been disturbed in years. I had to push through rhododendron thickets and step over fallen logs. The ground was steep enough that I was using trees to pull myself up. After about 10 minutes of climbing, I came out into a small clearing. It was maybe 30 feet across, roughly circular, ringed by old-growth trees. The ground was bare dirt, packed hard, with no grass or undergrowth. In the center of the clearing was a structure, a lean-to, built from branches and covered with a tarp that had been there long enough to grow moss. I approached slowly, my hand on my weapon. I called out, no response. I ducked down and looked inside the lean-to. It was empty except for some old blankets, a camping stove, and several plastic water bottles. But on the ground, written in the dirt, were words. Multiple messages, written and rewritten, some of them partially erased and overlapping. They watch from the trees. Can't go back to the road. Emily, don't look at them. They only move when you blink. The writing was frantic, done with fingers or a stick. Recent, the dirt was still loose around some of the letters. I backed out of the lean-to and scanned the tree line. The sun was setting now, and the shadows under the trees were getting deeper. I turned on my flashlight and swept it around the clearing. That's when I saw them. Figures standing in the trees at the edge of the clearing, perfectly still. There were 5 of them, maybe 6, spaced evenly around the circle, human-shaped but wrong, too tall, too thin, with limbs that seemed to bend in too many places. They were dark, silhouetted against the lighter forest behind them, and they didn't move. I drew my weapon, aimed my flashlight at the nearest figure. It was made of branches, a framework of sticks and limbs, woven together and propped upright, maybe 7 feet tall. As I looked closer, I could see it had been carefully constructed. A rough head shape, branch arms, a torso made from a lattice of smaller sticks. It looked like a scarecrow or a hunting blind, something meant to blend into the forest, except it hadn't been there a moment ago. I was sure of it. When I'd entered the clearing, it had been empty. I swung my light to the next figure. Same thing, branches woven into a human shape, propped up against a tree, then the next, and the next. They formed a complete circle around the clearing, all of them facing inward, toward me. I keyed my radio. Dispatch. I need backup at my location immediately. Static. I checked my radio. The battery was full, the signal indicator showed green, but all I got was static. I started backing toward the downhill side of the clearing, toward where I'd come up. I kept my flashlight moving, checking each figure. They didn't move. They couldn't move. They were just sticks. But there were 6 of them now. I counted again, 7. They were multiplying while I watched. I ran, I crashed down the slope, following the pink ribbons in reverse, my flashlight bouncing wildly. Behind me, I heard sounds, branches breaking, something large moving through the undergrowth, keeping pace with me. I reached the main trail and kept running downhill toward the road. My radio was still giving me static. My phone had no signal. I focused on putting distance between me and that clearing. I burst out of the woods and into the parking area just as full darkness fell. My cruiser was where I'd left it, lights still running. The blue sedan was still there, but now there was someone sitting in the driver's seat. I approached with my flashlight and weapon up. As I got closer, I could see it was a woman, Melissa Pruitt, based on the driver's license photo. She was slumped against the steering wheel, head down, not moving. "Ma'am, state police. Are you injured?" No response. I reached the driver's side door, tried the handle, locked. I tapped on the window. She raised her head slowly and looked at me. Her eyes were wide, pupils dilated. Her face was sunburned, lips cracked and bleeding. She'd been out in the heat for hours. When she saw me, she shook her head violently and mouthed one word: "Go." I tried to communicate through the window. Told her I was police, she was safe. I needed her to unlock the door. She just kept shaking her head, tears running down her face. Then I saw movement in my peripheral vision. I turned. The stick figures were at the edge of the parking area, just inside the tree line. 10 of them now, maybe more. Standing motionless, arranged in a semicircle, all facing toward the car. I turned back to Melissa. She was staring past me at the figures, her mouth moving soundlessly. My radio suddenly came back to life, clear as day. Dispatch asking for my status. I grabbed it, reported my location, said I had a female subject in medical distress and needed an ambulance and backup immediately. Possible disoriented hiker, signs of heat exhaustion. Dispatch acknowledged, said units were rolling. I kept my flashlight on the tree line. The figures didn't move. But I could swear there were more of them now, filling in the gaps, forming a complete wall of woven branches. I spoke to Melissa through the window, told her help was coming, told her to hold on. She whispered something I couldn't hear. I asked her to repeat it. They took Emily into the trees. I tried to follow. They kept moving her, putting her deeper. I couldn't reach her. I had to come back. I had to come back for help. Where is your daughter now? Still up there in the trees. They won't let her leave. I looked at the trail, then at the stick figures, then at my cruiser. I made a decision that I've questioned every day since. I waited for backup. The ambulance arrived 15 minutes later, followed by a sheriff's deputy and 2 park rangers. Melissa let them open the car door, and they got her into the ambulance. She was severely dehydrated, disoriented. Her core temperature was elevated. They rushed her to the hospital in Newport. The rangers and I went back up the trail with high-powered lights and a search dog. We found the pink ribbons. We found the clearing. The lean-to was there, and the messages in the dirt, but the stick figures were gone. No trace of them, no disturbance in the undergrowth, nothing. We searched for Emily Pruitt all night and into the next day, brought in search and rescue teams, helicopters, cadaver dogs. We combed a 10-mile radius around that parking area. We found nothing. No trace of a 6-year-old girl. No footprints, no clothing. No sign she'd ever been in those woods. Melissa was in the hospital for 3 days. When she was released, police interviewed her extensively. Her story never changed. She and Emily had been hiking, had gotten off the main trail somehow, had become lost. Emily had seen something in the woods, Melissa wouldn't say what, and had followed it. Melissa had chased after her but couldn't keep up. Every time she got close, Emily would be further away, moving impossibly fast through terrain the child shouldn't have been able to cross. Eventually, Melissa had lost sight of her completely. She'd searched until dark, then managed to find her way back to the car. She tried to drive for help, but the car wouldn't start. She tried to hike out to get help, but every time she left the parking area, she'd end up back there, like the woods were looping her around. Finally, she'd locked herself in the car and waited, hoping someone would find her before it was too late. The case is still open. Emily Pruitt is listed as missing, presumed lost in Great Smoky Mountains National Park. There are theories: abduction, animal attack, falling into a hidden crevice or cave, but no evidence to support any of them. I've been back to that parking area. In daylight, it looks normal. A scenic pull-off, a peaceful trailhead. The ribbons are gone. I don't know who put them there or why, but sometimes, when I drive past at night, I slow down and shine my spotlight into the trees. And sometimes, just for a second, I see shapes standing in the forest. Tall, thin, impossibly still. Human-shaped, but wrong. I don't stop anymore. I just keep driving, and I don't look back. Melissa Pruitt moved out of Tennessee 6 months after Emily disappeared. Last I heard, she was somewhere in Florida, far from the mountains. The car was towed from the pull-off and sold for scrap. The park rangers closed that particular trail for maintenance and never reopened it. If you hike in the Smokies, stay on the marked trails. If you see ribbons marking a path into the woods that isn't on the map, don't follow them. And if you see something standing motionless in the trees, something that looks almost human but not quite, turn around and walk away. Because in those mountains, there are things that have been there longer than the trails, longer than the roads, and they have their own ways of marking territory. Once they take an interest in you, the only question is whether you'll make it back to your car before full dark.
Our next account involves a North Carolina state trooper who learned that certain fog banks don't dissipate with the sunrise, and that the vehicles trapped inside them have been traveling the same stretch of road for much longer than should be possible.
I'm David, 41 years old, and I've served with the North Carolina State Highway Patrol for 16 years. I grew up in Asheville, so the mountains of western North Carolina are home to me. In 2015, I was assigned to a district covering portions of Madison and Yancey counties, working the highways that cut through some of the most isolated and beautiful terrain in the state. These are roads where the elevation changes 3,000 feet in 10 miles, where you drive through clouds, and where the valleys stay in shadow half the day. This happened in early October 2015, during what locals call the shoulder season, after the summer tourists leave but before the leaf peepers arrive. I was working a graveyard shift, midnight to noon, covering US 19 and several secondary roads that branch off into the high country. Around 3:30 a.m., I was heading north on US 19 to 23, the 4-lane highway that runs along the French Broad River. It was a clear night, temperature in the 40s, no traffic. I was about 10 miles south of Mars Hill when I drove into fog. It came on suddenly, a wall of white that reduced visibility to maybe 20 feet. I slowed to 40 miles an hour, turned on my flashers, and continued carefully. Fog isn't unusual in these mountains. It forms in the valleys and can be thick as soup. Usually it burns off after sunrise, but until then you just have to be careful. I'd been driving through it for maybe 5 minutes when I saw the vehicle ahead of me. Tail lights, barely visible through the fog, moving slowly, maybe 30 miles an hour. I stayed back, giving them space. As I got closer, I could see it was an old car, 60s or early 70s based on the shape. A station wagon, maybe, with wood paneling on the sides. I followed it for about a mile. The fog wasn't thinning at all. If anything, it was getting denser. I checked my GPS. According to it, I should have been passing the Mars Hill exit, but I couldn't see any signs. Just the tail lights ahead of me and the white fog pressing in on all sides. The station wagon's brake lights flashed, and it slowed even further. I slowed too, staying back. That's when I noticed there were people in the car. I could see shapes in the back window. Multiple people, maybe a family. The vehicle pulled to the side of the road and stopped. I pulled in behind it, activated my lights, and called it in to dispatch. I gave them my approximate location and said I was making contact with a vehicle that had pulled over. Dispatch acknowledged, but the signal was weak, full of static. I got out and approached the station wagon. My flashlight cut through the fog and I could see the vehicle more clearly now. It was old, definitely early 70s with that wood grain paneling they used to put on station wagons. The paint was faded, the chrome bumper pitted with rust. I came up on the driver's side and tapped on the window with my flashlight. The window rolled down, hand crank, not electric, the yump. Driver was a man in his 40s, wearing a suit and tie that looked decades out of style. He had a thin mustache and thick-framed glasses. He looked at me with an expression that was hard to read. Not scared, not confused, just resigned. "Good evening, sir. I'm with the North Carolina State Highway Patrol. Is everything all right?" He nodded slowly. "We're lost. We've been driving for hours. Can't find the exit." His voice was flat, emotionless. I looked past him into the car. A woman sat in the passenger seat wearing a dress and pearls. In the back seat were 2 children, a boy and a girl, both of them staring straight ahead. They all looked exhausted. "Where are you trying to go?" "Johnson City," the man said. "We're coming from Asheville. Should have been there hours ago." Johnson City was in Tennessee, maybe 40 miles north. Easy drive even in the fog. "You're on US 19, I told him. "Just stay on this road. You'll hit the Tennessee state line in about 20 miles. Johnson City is another 20 past that. This fog should thin out once you get higher up the mountain." He shook his head. "We've been on this road all night. Keep driving, but we never get anywhere. We pass the same places over and over." I looked at him more carefully. His suit was old-fashioned, something from the 70s. His glasses were the kind they didn't make anymore. And there was something about the way his skin looked in my flashlight beam. Pale, almost gray. "Sir, have you been drinking tonight?" "No. We left Asheville at 7 o'clock this evening. Started getting foggy around 8. We've been in it ever since. Can't find our way out. I checked my watch. It was 3:47 a.m. That would be almost 9 hours of driving. Something was very wrong. Can I see your license and registration, please? He reached for the glove box. The woman in the passenger seat turned and looked at me for the first time. Her eyes were hollow, dark circles underneath them. She didn't say anything, just stared. The man handed me a license and a registration card. I shined my light on them. The license was old style, the kind North Carolina stopped issuing in the early 80s. The photo showed a younger version of the man with less gray in his hair. The name was Robert Mitchell. The address was in Asheville. The issue date was 1973. The registration was for a 1972 Ford Country Squire station wagon. I looked at the man again. Sir, this license expired over 40 years ago. That can't be right. I just renewed it. I looked at the date again. October 15th, 1973. Today was October 15th, 2015. Exactly 42 years later. I keyed my radio, tried to call dispatch. Nothing but static. I tried my cell phone. No signal. I looked up and down the road. The fog was so thick now I couldn't see more than 15 feet in any direction. My patrol car was barely visible behind me, just the flashing lights cutting through the white. Mr. Mitchell, I need you and your family to step out of the, vehicle. Why? Are we in trouble? No, sir. I just need to verify some information. Please, step out. He opened the door and got out. He moved stiffly like his joints hurt. The woman and the children didn't move. They just sat there staring straight ahead. I walked Mr. Mitchell back toward my patrol car, keeping my flashlight on him. He looked around at the fog, confused. How long has it been like this? He asked. Like what? So foggy. We can't see anything. The children are scared. Martha hasn't spoken in hours. I didn't know what to say. I opened the back door of my cruiser and asked him to sit down. He complied. I radioed dispatch again, got nothing but static. I walked back to the station wagon. The woman, Martha, was still in the passenger seat. I tapped on the window. She didn't react. I opened the door. Ma'am, I need you to step out of the vehicle. She turned and looked at me. Her face was expressionless. Are we there yet? Ma'am, where are you trying to go? Johnson City, Robert's mother's house. We're supposed to be there for dinner. What date is today, ma'am? October 15th. What year? She paused, her expression flickering with confusion. 1973. It's 1973. I felt cold spread through my chest. I looked in the back seat at the children. They were maybe 7 and 9 years old, both of them wearing clothes from another era. They stared at me with empty eyes. Kids, can you hear me? The boy nodded. We want to get out of the fog. We've been driving forever. I stepped back from the car, my mind racing. This wasn't possible. This was some kind of elaborate prank, or I was having a psychotic break, or I'd been drugged. But the station wagon was real. The people were real. And the license in my pocket was real, dated 1973. I walked back to my cruiser. Mr. Mitchell was sitting in the back seat, looking out at the fog. Mr. Mitchell, what's the last thing you remember before the fog? He thought for a moment. We were driving through Asheville, heading north. The sun was setting. Martha was worried we'd be late. The children were fighting in the back seat. And then it got foggy. Very foggy. Very fast. I slowed down. And we've been in it ever since. You've been driving all night? Yes. Hours and hours. We keep passing the same signs, the same mile markers, but we never seem to get anywhere. I pulled out my phone, tried again to get signal. Nothing. I checked my GPS. It was frozen, showing my location as somewhere in the middle of US 19, but not updating. I looked at the fog surrounding us. It seemed to be moving now, swirling, forming patterns. And I could hear something, faint at first, then growing louder. Engines, multiple engines, like there were other vehicles out there in the fog, driving in circles. "Do you hear that?" Mr. Mitchell asked. I nodded. "There are others," he said. "Sometimes we see them. Other cars, other people, all of them lost, all of them trying to find their way out." I looked down the Jacqueline Road into the fog. For a moment, I saw headlights, multiple sets, moving slowly through the white. Cars from different eras, 50s, 60s, 80s, all of them crawling along, searching for an exit that didn't exist. I made a decision. "Mr. Mitchell, I need you and your family to stay in your vehicle. Lock the doors. Don't get out, no matter what you see or hear. I'm going to try to find a way out of this fog, and I'll come back for you. You can't leave us. Please. We've been alone for so long. I'll come back, I promise." I wasn't sure I believed that, but I had to try something. I got in my cruiser and started driving. I didn't follow the road. I turned perpendicular to it and drove onto the shoulder, into the grass, heading uphill toward higher ground. If this was natural fog, it would thin out as I gained elevation. I drove for what felt like 20 minutes, my speedometer showing 30 miles an hour, my altimeter showing I was climbing. But the fog stayed thick, and I kept seeing things at the edges of my headlight beams. Vehicles, dozens of them parked or moving slowly, all trapped in the same white void. And then suddenly, I broke through. The fog ended like a curtain and I was in clear air under a starry sky. I slammed on the brakes, looked back. Behind me was a wall of white, impossibly dense, covering the valley like a solid object. I was on a ridge, somewhere above the main road. I could see the lights of Mars Hill in the distance, maybe 5 miles north. My radio crackled to life. "Unit 47, please respond. We've lost your GPS signal." I grabbed the radio. "Dispatch, this is 47. I'm on US 19 north of Marshall. I need backup, and I need someone to research an accident or missing persons case from October 15th, 1973. Family name: Mitchell, Robert, and Martha Mitchell. 2 children, last seen traveling from Asheville to Johnson City." There was a pause. "47, can you repeat that? Did you say 1973? "Yes. Please, just look it up. I'll explain when backup arrives." I waited on that ridge for 45 minutes. When the backup unit arrived, a deputy from Madison County, we went back down into the valley together. The fog was gone, completely gone. US 19 was clear and empty, lit by sodium lights, looking like it always did. We searched for the station wagon. We drove up and down a 10-mile stretch. We found nothing. No vehicle, no people, no sign that anyone had been there. The next day, I went to the state archives and looked up the records myself. In October 1973, Robert Mitchell, age 43, his wife Martha, age 39, and their 2 children, Susan and William, had disappeared while driving from Asheville to Johnson City. Their vehicle, a 1972 Ford Country Squire station wagon, had been found abandoned on US 19-23 near Mars Hill, completely undamaged, with the keys in the ignition and the fuel tank full. The family was never seen again. The case had been investigated as a possible abduction or foul play, but no evidence was ever found. It remained unsolved. There was a photo in the file, the 4 of them taken a few months before they disappeared. Robert in a suit, Martha in a dress and pearls, the 2 children smiling. They looked exactly like the people I'd met in the fog. I've driven that stretch of US 19 hundreds of times since that night. Most of the time it's normal. But maybe once or twice a year, always in October, always between midnight and dawn, I'll hit a patch of fog that's too thick, too white, too uniform, and I'll see headlights in it, old-style round headlights moving slowly. When that happens, I roll up my windows, lock my doors, and I drive through as fast as I safely can. I don't stop. I don't investigate. Because I know now that fog isn't weather. It's something else. A trap, maybe, or a fold in time. A place where people who got lost in 1973 are still trying to find their way home. And I know that if I stop, if I get out of my car and try to help them, I might end up joining them. Driving in circles forever, watching the same mile markers pass, never reaching my destination, trapped in an eternal October night where the fog never lifts and the road never ends. The Mitchell family is still listed as missing. Their case file is still open. And somewhere in those mountains, on the right night, under the right conditions, they're still out there. Still driving. Still lost. Still looking for an exit that disappeared 42 years ago.
This testimony comes from a highway patrol officer in Georgia who discovered that certain rural routes are shared by more than just the living, and that giving a stranger a ride can have consequences that last far longer than the journey itself.
My name is Rachel. I'm 36 years old, and I've been with the Georgia State Patrol for 8 years. I grew up in Athens, but in 2018 I was assigned to a rural district covering parts of Rabun and Habersham counties in the far northeastern corner of the state. It's mountain country, heavily forested, with small towns connected by 2-lane highways that twist through gaps and along ridgelines. Beautiful in the daylight, but isolated and dark at night. What happened to me occurred in December 2018, in the week between Christmas and New Year's. I was working a night shift, 8 p.m. to 6 a.m., covering US 441 and various state routes that branch off into the national forest. It was cold that week, temperatures dropping into the 20s at night, and there had been warnings about ice on the mountain roads. Traffic was light. Most people were home for the holidays. I spent most of my shifts checking on the few businesses that stayed open and making sure the roads stayed passable. Around 11 p.m. on December 28th, I was heading north on Highway 441, about 15 miles south of Clayton. It was a clear night, no moon, just stars, and the darkness of the forest pressing in on both sides of the road. I had the heater running and the radio low, scanning channels out of boredom. That's when I saw her. She was standing on the shoulder of the road, lit by my headlights. A woman, maybe in her 20s, wearing a thin dress that looked completely inadequate for the weather. No coat, no shoes. She was facing the road, one arm partially raised, like she'd been trying to wave down a car. I slowed down immediately, hit my lights, and pulled over about 20 feet past her. I got out and approached carefully, my flashlight up. "Ma'am, are you all right? Do you need assistance?" She turned to face me. She was young, pretty, with long dark hair, but her skin was pale, almost bluish in the cold, and she was shivering violently. Her feet were bare, and I could see they were cut and bleeding. "I need help," she said. Her voice was thin, strained. "Please, I need to get to Clayton." "Ma'am, you're not dressed for this weather. Are you injured? Where's your vehicle?" "I don't have a vehicle. I was with someone. He left me here. Please, I need to get to Clayton. My family is there." I could see she was in bad shape. Possible hypothermia. Definitely exposure. I needed to get her warm and to a hospital. "Okay, I'm going to help you. Come with me." I guided her to my patrol car and got her into the back seat. I turned the heat up high and grabbed an emergency blanket from my trunk. I wrapped it around her, then got in the front seat and radioed dispatch. I reported picking up a female subject, possible hypothermia, requesting an ambulance to meet me at the hospital in Clayton. Dispatch acknowledged. What's your name, ma'am? Emily. Emily Warren. Emily, I'm Trooper Rachel Simmons. You're safe now. We're going to get you to the hospital. Can you tell me what happened? She was still shivering, pulling the blanket tighter. I was with my boyfriend. We were driving to Clayton to see my parents. We had a fight. He pushed me out of the car, left me on the side of the road. I tried to walk, but I got so cold. When did this happen? An hour ago, maybe? I'm not sure. I've been walking for a while. I started driving north toward Clayton, keeping an eye on her in the rearview mirror. She looked miserable, her teeth chattering, her arms wrapped around herself. Do you know your boyfriend's name? We'll need to file a report. She hesitated. David Chen. Please, I just want to see my parents. We'll get you to them. Do you have their phone number? We can call them, let them know you're okay. I don't remember it. I had my phone, but David took it. Please, just take me to their house. It's on River Road in Clayton. Something about her story felt off, but I attributed it to the trauma and the cold. People in shock don't always make sense. I focused on getting her to safety. We drove for about 10 minutes in silence. I kept checking on her in the mirror. She was staring out the window, watching the forest pass by, her expression distant. How long were you walking? I asked, trying to keep her alert. I don't know. A long time. I got so tired. I thought no one would find me. You're lucky I came along when I did. This stretch doesn't see much traffic at night. She nodded. I know. I thought I was going to die out here. Something in the way she said it made me look at her more closely in the mirror. Her face was still pale, but she'd stopped shivering. The color wasn't coming back like it should have. Emily, are you feeling any better? Getting warm? Yes, thank you. You saved my life. We were approaching Clayton now, the lights of the small town visible ahead. I radioed dispatch. Confirmed the ambulance was meeting us at the hospital. They acknowledged. My parents' house is on River Road, Emily said. Can you take me there instead of the hospital? I just want to see them. Emily, you need medical attention. You've been exposed to dangerous cold. We need to make sure you're okay. Please, just drive past their house. I need to see if they're home. Against my better judgment, I agreed. River Road was on the way to the hospital anyway. I turned onto it, following her directions. It's the White House, up on the left, with the green shutters. I saw the house, a small ranch-style home, dark except for a porch light. There were no vehicles in the driveway. Looks like nobody's home, Emily. Let's get you to the hospital, and we can call them from there. She was staring at the house, her expression strange. They're not home. They're never home. Emily? They moved away. Years ago, after I died. I felt ice slide down my spine. What? She met my eyes in the rearview mirror. December 28, 1996. My boyfriend pushed me out of his car on 441 about 15 miles south of here. I tried to walk to my parents' house. I froze to death before I made it. They found my body 2 days later. I slammed on the brakes, the car skidding slightly on the cold road. I turned around in my seat to look at her directly. The back seat was empty. Just the emergency blanket, folded neatly on the seat. No sign of Emily. No wet footprints. No dirt from her bare feet. Nothing. I got out of the car, checked the back seat, checked the road. Nothing. She was gone. My hands were shaking. I got back in the car and sat there for a long time, trying to process what had just happened. Eventually, I radioed dispatch, told them to cancel the ambulance. I said the subject had refused medical care and had been dropped off at her destination. That was a lie, but I didn't know how to explain the truth. The next day, I went to the county library and searched old newspapers. I found the article in the December 30th, 1996 edition of the Clayton Tribune. Local woman found dead on Highway 441. Emily Warren, age 24, had been found deceased on the shoulder of US 441, approximately 15 miles south of Clayton. Cause of death was exposure and hypothermia. According to the report, she'd been pushed from a vehicle during an argument with her boyfriend, David Chen, who was subsequently arrested and charged with involuntary manslaughter. He'd served 8 years in prison. There was a photo with the article. Emily Warren, smiling. The same face I'd seen in my back seat. The article said her parents had moved to Florida a few years after her death. The house on River Road had been sold. I went back to the spot where I'd picked her up. In the daylight, I could see it clearly. Just a stretch of highway, with forest on both sides. There was nothing unusual about it. But when I closed my eyes, I could still see her standing there, one arm raised, waiting for someone to stop. I never reported what really happened that night. What would I say? That I'd picked up a ghost, driven her to her childhood home, and watched her vanish from my back seat. They'd have me evaluated, maybe put on administrative leave, but I drive that stretch of road every shift, and I watch for her. Maybe once every few weeks, late at night, I'll see something on the shoulder, a flash of white, a figure standing just outside my headlight beam, and every time my heart stops, I slow down. Sometimes I stop, but when I get out and shine my flashlight around, there's nothing there. Just the road and the forest and the cold mountain air. Emily Warren died on December 28th, 1996, trying to walk home to Clayton. Her body was found, her killer was convicted, and her family moved away. But something of her is still out there on that road, still trying to finish the journey she started 22 years ago, still hoping someone will stop, someone will help her get home. I think about her sometimes, late at night when the roads are empty. I wonder how many times she stood on that shoulder watching cars pass. I wonder how many people have seen her and kept driving, too scared or too uncertain to stop. And I wonder if, by stopping that night, I gave her some small measure of peace. Or if I just became part of her endless loop. Another trooper who promised to take her home and failed. I don't work that shift anymore. I requested a transfer to day shifts, but I still hear things from the night patrol officers. Every winter, especially around the holidays, someone reports seeing a woman on the side of Highway 441, wearing a thin dress, no shoes, looking like she needs help. Sometimes officers stop. Sometimes they report picking someone up, turning around to check on them, and finding their back seat empty. The official line is that it's an optical illusion, or people seeing deer in the headlights and misinterpreting it. But those of us who've stopped, who've seen her up close, who felt the cold that surrounds her, we know better. There's something about that stretch of Highway 441 that holds on to the past. Emily Warren is part of it now, replaying her last night over and over, hoping each time that this will be the night she makes it home. And those of us who patrol these roads have learned to watch for her, to recognize her, and to understand that some promises can't be kept. no matter how badly we want to keep them. If you ever drive Highway 441 through Ribbon County on a cold December night, and you see a young woman standing on the shoulder in inadequate clothing, you'll have to make a choice. You can stop and offer help, knowing that she'll vanish before you reach your destination. Or you can keep driving, adding yourself to the long list of people who saw her and passed by. Either way, Emily Warren will still be there tomorrow night, and the night after that. Still cold, still lost, still hoping the next car will be the one that finally takes her home.
This next story involves a South Carolina trooper who learned that some highways have exit ramps that don't appear on any map, and the destinations they lead to are places no living person should ever visit.
I'm Thomas, 43 years old, and I've been with the South Carolina Highway Patrol for 17 years. I'm from Columbia, but in 2019 I was assigned to cover parts of the upstate, including sections of I-26 and various rural highways through Greenville and Spartanburg counties. It's a mix of terrain, mountains in the northwest transitioning to Piedmont, with highways that range from busy interstates to quiet country roads. This happened in June 2019, during a heat wave that had temperatures pushing past 100 degrees. I was working a swing shift, 4 p.m. to 2 a.m., and by the time midnight rolled around, the heat had driven everyone indoors. The highways were emptier than I'd seen them in years. Around 12:30 a.m., I was southbound on I-26, about 20 miles north of Spartanburg. It was a clear night, still hot with humidity that made the air feel thick. I was cruising at 70, just monitoring traffic, which at that hour consisted of maybe one vehicle every 5 minutes. I saw the exit sign ahead, lit by my headlights. It looked official, green with white lettering, the standard federal highway design. But the text was strange. Exit 67, Ashford, 1 mile. I'd driven this stretch of I-26 hundreds of times. I knew every exit. There was no exit 67, and there was no place called Ashford anywhere in this part of South Carolina. I slowed down, thinking maybe it was a new sign I hadn't noticed, or maybe construction had added an exit. But as I got closer, something felt wrong. The sign looked old. The green was faded, the white lettering stained and dirty, and the reflective coating was wrong, too dull, like the sign had been there for decades. I watched for the exit ramp. Sure enough, about a quarter mile ahead, there was a ramp leading off to the right. It looked legitimate, properly graded with a guardrail and the usual deceleration lane. But the pavement was different, older, darker, and there were no lights on the exit, which was unusual. All the exits on this stretch of I-26 were lit. I made a split-second decision. I signaled and took the exit. The ramp curved down and to the right, descending below the level of the interstate. I expected it to connect to a state highway or a local road. Instead, it just kept curving, spiraling down in a long, smooth arc. I drove for what felt like too long, descending too far, until I finally reached the bottom and the road straightened out. I was on a 2-lane road, narrow, with cracked pavement and no painted lines. Trees pressed in close on both sides, old oaks draped with Spanish moss, which didn't make sense this far north and inland. The air coming through my vents smelled different, stagnant, like swamp water. I checked my GPS. The screen was blank, showing no signal. I checked my radio. Static. Ahead of me, I saw a sign. Welcome to Ashford. Population 847. The sign was wooden, hand-painted, and looked like it hadn't been updated in half a century. I continued driving slowly, my emergency lights still on, scanning for any sign of life. The town appeared gradually, a handful of buildings set back from the road, all of them dark. A post office with boarded windows, a gas station with pumps that were ancient, the kind that had mechanical dials instead of digital displays, a diner with a flickering neon sign that said "Eat" in red letters. There were vehicles parked along the street, Cars from different eras, 50s, 60s, 70s, all of them in various states of decay. Flat tires, broken windows, paint, faded to nothing. But no people, no lights in the windows, no movement. I drove through the center of town, which consisted of maybe 6 blocks. Every building was abandoned, every window dark. At the far end of town, I saw another sign, Ashford Town Limits, thanks for visiting. Beyond that sign, the road continued into darkness. I stopped my cruiser in the middle of the street and got out. The heat hit me immediately. Not just hot, but oppressive, like the air itself was pressing down. And the smell was stronger now. Rot and stagnant water, and something else. Something chemical. I walked to the diner and tried the door. Locked. I shined my flashlight through the window. Inside, I could see tables and chairs covered in dust, a counter with stools, a jukebox in the corner. Everything looked frozen in time, like people had just walked away one day and never come back. I tried my radio again, still static. I walked back to my cruiser and stood there trying to decide what to do. That's when I heard the music. It was coming from the diner, faint, tinny, like an old recording playing through weak speakers. Big band music, something from the 40s or 50s. I walked back to the diner. The door was still locked, but the music was definitely coming from inside. I could see the jukebox now, lit up, glowing in the darkness, its display cycling through song titles. And then I saw movement inside, a figure passing behind the counter. Then another, and another. People appearing out of nowhere, taking seats at the tables, moving behind the counter, acting like it was a normal evening at a diner in a living town. But they were wrong. Their movements were too slow, too deliberate. And when one of them turned toward the window, I saw their face was blurred, the features smudged like a photograph left out in the rain. I backed away from the window, returned to my cruiser, and got in. I put the car in gear and drove forward, past the town limits sign, into the darkness beyond. The road continued for about a mile, unchanged, cracked pavement, overhanging trees, that oppressive heat and smell. And then I saw lights ahead. Red taillights, a line of them. Maybe a dozen vehicles stopped on the road. I slowed down and pulled up behind the last vehicle. It was an old sedan, rust-covered, sitting at an angle with its driver's side door open. The engine was running. I got out and approached. Inside, I could see someone in the driver's seat, a man slumped over the steering wheel. I called out, identified myself. No response. I reached in and touched his shoulder. He was cold, dead, and had been for a while. I looked at the vehicles ahead of him. All of them were the same. Doors open, engines running, drivers slumped over or leaning back in their seats, all of them long dead. A traffic jam of corpses, waiting on a road that went nowhere. I backed away, returned to my cruiser, and made a decision. I threw the car into reverse and started backing up at speed, retracing my route through the town. As I passed through Ashford again, I looked at the diner. The figures inside were watching me through the window, their blurred faces turned in my direction. The music was still playing. I kept reversing until I reached the point where I'd entered the town. There was a sign I hadn't noticed before, facing the other direction. "Leaving Ashford. Come back soon." Past that sign, the road began to climb. I kept reversing, following the spiral ramp back up. It felt like it took forever, like I was climbing up out of something much deeper than a highway underpass. And then suddenly, I was back on I-26, the northbound side, heading the wrong direction, but back on the interstate. I pulled over onto the shoulder, sat there breathing hard, my hands shaking on the wheel. I looked in my rearview mirror. Behind me, the interstate was normal. Painted lines, overhead lights, normal pavement, no sign of an exit ramp. I got out and walked back to where I'd emerged. There was nothing there. Just a stretch of guardrail and the embankment sloping down to the trees below. My radio crackled to life. Dispatch, asking for my location. I told them I was on I-26 northbound, mile marker 64, and I was turning around to resume patrol. They acknowledged without comment. I drove back north, watching for the exit sign. When I reached the spot where it should have been, there was nothing. Just a normal stretch of interstate between exits 63 and 69. Exit 67 didn't exist. The next day, I researched Ashford. I couldn't find any town by that name in South Carolina. No current towns, no ghost towns, no historical references. It was like the place didn't exist, had never existed. But I found something else. In the archives, I found traffic reports from the late 60s and early 70s, documenting a series of disappearances on I-26. Over a span of about 5 years, 8 drivers had vanished without a trace. Their vehicles were found abandoned on the shoulder or on exit ramps, engines running, doors open, no sign of the drivers. The cases were never solved. The disappearances stopped in 1974. The official explanation was that they'd been the work of a serial killer who'd either died or moved on. But I think something else happened. I think there was an exit that wasn't supposed to be there, an off-ramp that led to a place called Ashford. And I think those drivers took that exit and never came back. I drive that stretch of I-26 every week. Sometimes I slow down around mile marker 65, looking for the sign. I've never seen it again, but other troopers have reported strange things in that area. Signs that appear and disappear. Exit ramps that show up on GPS but aren't there when you look for them. And once, about 6 months after my experience, another trooper radioed in that he'd taken an exit near mile marker 67 and ended up in a town he'd never heard of. A place with old buildings and no people and a smell like rot and chemicals. Dispatch told him to return to the interstate immediately. He did. When he tried to find the exit again, it was gone. The official position is that these are navigation errors, GPS glitches, or fatigue-related hallucinations. But those of us who've seen it know better. Somewhere in the network of highways that cross South Carolina, there's a road that shouldn't exist. And at the end of that road is a town called Ashford, a place that was abandoned a long time ago but refuses to stay empty. The people in that diner, the drivers in that traffic jam, they went to Ashford and they never left. They're still there, replaying their final moments, waiting for something. And the exit that leads to them is still out there, appearing and disappearing, patient and hungry, waiting for the next driver who makes the wrong turn at the wrong time. I don't know what Ashford was, or what it is now. I don't know if it's a place or a trap or something else entirely. But I know I'm not going back, and I tell every new trooper I meet. If you see an exit sign for a town you've never heard of, especially at night, especially when you're alone on an empty highway, keep driving. Don't take the exit. Don't even slow down. Because some roads lead to places we're not meant to go, and some destinations have been waiting a very long time for visitors who'll never be allowed to leave.
Our final account tonight comes from a West Virginia state trooper who discovered that certain vehicles on the mountain highways are carrying passengers who've been dead for longer than the cars have existed, and that sometimes the emergency calls we respond to are echoes from accidents that happened decades ago.
I'm Michael, and I've been a West Virginia state trooper for 21 years. I'm 45 now, originally from Morgantown, but I've spent most of my career working the southern coalfield counties, Boone, Logan, Mingo. It's hard country, economically depressed, with mountains that rise steep and sudden from narrow valleys. The roads wind through it all like threads, connecting communities that cling to the hillsides and the creek bottoms. This happened in February 2020, just before the pandemic changed everything. I was working a night shift, 10 p.m. to 8 a.m., covering Route 10, which runs through Boone County parallel to the Coal River. It was cold that week, temperatures in the teens, and there'd been warnings about ice on the mountain roads. Around 2 a.m., I was parked in a pull-off near the town of Jeffrey, running radar and catching up on paperwork. The highway was empty. Nothing moving except the occasional coal truck heading to or from the mines. My radio crackled with the transmission, not from dispatch, but a male voice, breathless and panicked. "This is Unit 34. We have a 1050 with multiple casualties, Route 10 southbound, mile marker 23. We need fire and medical. Multiple vehicles involved, possibly fatalities." I grabbed my radio. "Unit 34, this is Trooper Daniels. I'm approximately 2 miles from your location. What's your status?" Static, then the voice again. "We need help. Multiple injuries. Can't get to all of them. Fire is spreading." I hit my lights and accelerated south, calling dispatch as I drove. I reported a major accident at mile marker 23, requested fire and ambulance. Dispatch acknowledged, said they were rolling units, but they hadn't received the initial call from Unit 34. They asked me to confirm who Unit 34 was. I didn't know. I'd been with the department for over 2 decades, and I knew every active unit in my district. There was no Unit 34. But that didn't matter. If there was an accident with casualties, I needed to get there. I reached mile marker 23 within 3 minutes. I slowed down, scanning both sides of the road, looking for vehicles, for lights, for any sign of an accident. Nothing. The highway was empty. No skid marks, no debris, no smoke. Just dark pavement and the wall of forest on both sides. I stopped my cruiser in the middle of the road, got out with my flashlight, and searched on foot. I walked both sides of the highway, checking the shoulders and the embankments. No signs of a crash, recent or otherwise. I keyed my radio. "Dispatch, this is Daniels. I'm at mile marker 23. No sign of an accident. Can you try to raise Unit 34 again?" Dispatch tried. No response. They asked if I wanted to expand the search. I said yes. I drove slowly south, checking each pull-off, each side road. Nothing. After 2 miles, I turned around and headed north, checking the opposite side. Still nothing. And then I saw the lights. They were in my rearview mirror, coming up fast. Red and blue flashers, the pattern. Unmistakable. A police cruiser, racing up behind me at high speed. I moved to the right to let them pass, assuming it was backup. But as the vehicle got closer, something felt wrong. The lights were the old style, rotating beacons instead of LED bars. And the sound was wrong too. The siren was mechanical, the old wail and yelp style that modern cruisers don't use anymore. The vehicle pulled alongside me in the left lane. I looked over. It was an old cruiser, late 70s or early 80s, white with a blue stripe. West Virginia State Police markings, but the design was outdated. The light bar on top was one of the old federal signal models with rotating mirrors. I could see the driver, a state trooper in an old-style uniform, hunched over the wheel, driving hard. His face was turned away from me, focused on the road ahead. I tried to match his speed, to see where he was going. But he accelerated, pulling ahead, and then suddenly swerved to the right, leaving the highway and plunging down an embankment. I hit my brakes, skidded to a stop. I grabbed my flashlight and ran to the edge. Below me, maybe 30 feet down a steep slope, I could see the cruiser. It had crashed into a tree, the front end crumpled. The lights were still rotating, the siren still wailing. I could see fire starting to spread from the engine compartment. "Dispatch, I have a 1050 officer involved. Route 10 mile marker 22, single vehicle off the roadway. I need fire and medical immediately." I started down the embankment, sliding on the loose dirt and ice, using trees to slow my descent. The fire was growing, spreading across the hood. I could see the driver still in the seat, not moving. I reached the cruiser and tried the door. Jammed. I could feel the heat from the fire. I moved around to the passenger side, tried that door. It opened. I reached in, trying to unbuckle the trooper's seatbelt, trying to pull him out. His uniform was soaked with blood. There was a piece of metal, part of the steering column, driven through his chest. "Sir, can you hear me? I'm going to get you out." His head turned toward me slowly, his eyes opened. They were empty, not dead but hollow, like there was nothing behind them. "Unit 34, he whispered. "Multiple casualties. Need help. Help is coming. Just hold on. They're still in the cars, can't reach them. Fire is spreading." I looked past him, out through the shattered windshield, and I saw them, other vehicles scattered across the slope below us. A pickup truck wrapped around a tree, a station wagon on its side, a sedan crushed and twisted, all of them burning. And in each one, I could see figures, trapped, moving weakly, reaching toward the windows. "How many vehicles?" I asked the trooper. 7, maybe 8, chain reaction, ice on the road. They just kept hitting each other. I looked back toward the highway above us. It was empty. The slope was steep, but not that steep. If there'd been a major accident here, there would be evidence. Broken guardrails, debris, marks on the pavement. There was nothing. I looked back at the trooper. When did this happen? Tonight, just now. Responded to the call. Got here, tried to help, lost control, went off the road. What's your name? Trooper First Class David Monroe, Unit 34. I felt ice that had nothing to do with the weather. What year is this? He looked confused. 1981, February 12th, 1981. I let go of him and backed away out of the cruiser. The fire was spreading, but it wasn't reaching the interior. It just kept burning at the same intensity, spreading across the hood, but never consuming the vehicle. I looked at the other cars on the slope. They were all burning the same way, flames that moved but didn't consume, trapped in a moment that wouldn't end. I climbed back up to the highway, my breath coming in gasps. I stood on the shoulder looking down at the scene below. The cruiser, the other vehicles, all of them burning, all of them trapped in February 12th, 1981. My radio crackled. Dispatch asking for my status. I told them I was code 4, false alarm, no accident at the location. They acknowledged, confused, but accepting it. I stood there for a long time, watching the lights rotate on that old cruiser, listening to the siren wail. Eventually, the sounds faded, the lights dimmed, and when I looked down again, there was nothing but dark forest and the slope of the mountain. I went back to my station that morning and pulled the archives. February 12th, 1981. Route 10, mile marker, 22. A chain reaction accident involving 8 vehicles during an ice storm. 7 people killed. One of them was Trooper First Class David Monroe, Unit 34, who'd responded to the initial accident and lost control of his cruiser on the ice, going off the roadway and down the embankment. According to the report, Monroe had remained at the scene, trying to help the victims, even after his own vehicle had crashed and caught fire. He died before fire, and rescue could reach him. There was a photo in the file. David Monroe, age 32, in his state police uniform, the same face I'd seen in that burning cruiser. I've driven past mile marker 22 thousands of times since that night. Most of the time, it's just a stretch of highway like any other. But sometimes, late at night when the temperature drops and the roads ice over, I hear transmissions on the radio, a voice calling for help, reporting a major accident, asking for fire and medical. Unit 34, still trying to save people from an accident that happened 40 years ago. Other troopers have reported seeing the lights too. An old cruiser with rotating beacons, racing down Route 10 in the middle of the night, then leaving the roadway at mile marker 22. Some have gone down to investigate and found nothing. Others have seen the burning vehicles, the trapped people, and have climbed back up to the highway without saying a word to anyone. There's no official record of these incidents, no reports filed. Because how do you explain it? How do you write a report that says you witnessed an accident from 1981, that you spoke to a dead trooper, that you saw ghosts burning in cars that were towed away and scrapped decades ago? You don't. You just keep driving. You respond to the calls you can help with, and you learn to recognize the ones you can't. And if you hear Unit 34 calling for help on a cold February night, you acknowledge the transmission, but you don't stop at mile marker 22 because there's nothing you can do for David Monroe and the people he's been trying to save for 40 years. They're trapped in that moment, replaying it over and over, the accident, the fire, the desperate attempts at rescue that came too late. And they'll keep replaying it as long as Route 10 exists, as long as troopers patrol these mountains, as long as the ice forms on the pavement on cold February nights. Some accidents leave scars that never heal. Some calls for help echo forever. And some of us who wear the uniform learn that our duty doesn't end with our shift, or our career, or even our lives. We keep trying to help, keep responding to those calls, even when there's no help to give and nobody left to save. David Monroe taught me that. And every time I drive past mile marker 22, I think about him still down there in that burning cruiser, still trying to reach the people in those other vehicles, still calling for backup that will never arrive. He died trying to help. And in a way, he never stopped. That's something worth remembering the next time you see those red and blue lights in your mirror on a dark mountain highway.
These are the stories we carry, those of us who patrol the back highways and forgotten roads of Appalachia. We see things that never make it into reports, encounter situations that training never prepared us for, and learn that the mountains hold secrets darker and older than any of us can fully understand. The men and women who shared these accounts with us continued to work these roads, continued to respond when someone calls for help, knowing that sometimes the call comes from places and people that exist outside our normal understanding of the world. If you find yourself traveling through Appalachian country on those winding mountain highways where the hollers run deep and the forests press close, remember that you're driving through territory that's seen centuries of loss, tragedy, and mystery. Stay on the main roads. Don't follow strange lights. Don't pick up hitchhikers and clothing from another era. And if you see an old cruiser with rotating beacons racing past you in the night, let it go, because chances are that trooper has been responding to the same call for decades, trying to reach an accident that happened so long ago, there's nothing left to save except the memory of duty itself. The roads remember, the mountains remember, and those of us who patrol them learn to remember too, carrying these stories like warnings, like prayers, like promises that we'll keep watching, keep responding, keep trying to help, even when we know that some calls come from places where help arrived too late a long time ago. Thank you for listening to Blacktop Files. If you have your own experiences from the highways and back roads of Appalachia, we want to hear them. Stay safe out there. And remember, not everything you see in your headlights is what it appears to be. Until next time, keep your eyes on the road, your doors locked, and your radio tuned to a frequency where help can actually reach you.